ICQ Podcast episode 264, Introduction to Decibels. Well, hello fellow amateur radio enthusiasts and welcome to this, our 264th episode of the ICQ Amateur Radio Podcast, supported by Sterling Coffee and our monthly and annual subscription donors. In this episode, I'm joined by Dan, KB6 November Uniform, Ed, DD5 Lima Papa, and Martin, M1MRB, to discuss latest amateur radio news. Myself, Colin M6BOY, rounds up the news in brief, and this episode's feature is a feature of an introduction to Decibels. Well, as always, it's our donors that help keep this show advert-free for you. And along with the monthly and annual subscription donors, Sterling Coffee joins us this episode, who also set up a monthly subscription plan. Sterling, we really do appreciate that. It provides us a base which helps pay our way, and I say they're very, very important. So thank you very much for doing that for us, Sterling. You can help us out by visiting www.icqpodcast.com/donate, where anything you send our way is always greatly appreciated. Well, now I'm joined by Martin, Dan and Ed to discuss latest amateur radio news, including a massive batch of amateurs in the States and Hour of Circuits program. Hope you enjoy.
The ICQ Amateur Ham Radio Podcast, serving the amateur ham radio community fortnightly since 2008.
Well, hi everyone, welcome to the episode 264 ICQ Podcast Roundtable here. Colin M6BOY chairing this episode's roundtable, but don't despair, I haven't sacked him. He's here this week, Mr. Martin Butler, M1MRB W9 ICQ. Welcome to the show, and say, not in the chair this week.
I don't know, I'm sitting down.
and we'll put the straps on and keep you in one position. Join us also is Ed Durrant, DD5 Lima Papa. Ed, great speech again, and only a few weeks ago until Friedrichshafen.
That's right. Looking forward to seeing you over here.
Exactly, and seeing the harmonic as well, which we're going to use as our mule for a few days. It'll be good to get some help, as they say. And
that's not Chris.
No, that's not Chris.
Chris is coming as well.
Exactly, he certainly is. And also we have Dan with us. Dan, Kilo Bravo 6 November Uniform. Dan, welcome. Good to be with you again on the show. It's been a few months now since I've been with yourself, but great to have you with us.
Great to be here.
Thank you very much. Well, okay, so let's have a look at the news stories for this episode. And we start with a story in the States. So, Dan, we'll start with you. This was also picked up by our friend of the show, Malcolm Howe, Foxtrot 4 Victor Romeo X-Ray. And this is news of 3,000 new ham licensees and 7,000 amateur radio exam sessions were scheduled in the States in 2017. So this is more great news of more amateurs coming on the stream, isn't it, Dan?
Well, so there's several things here. The first thing is there are 32,196 new licensees. It's a little bit of a drop from 2016, but still pretty good. The other part of this, though, is that more than 27,000, I forget what the number is here, had actually dropped off the roll. So we only have a net gain of about 5,500 new licensees, or licensees in the FCC database. So that got me thinking about that. Is like, what could we do to reduce the number of people that are actually dropping off the rolls? And I think the ARRL needs to look into that a little bit.
But certainly, though, a growth is still a growth, though, isn't it, Ed? And I mean, it does continue the trend we're seeing also in some European countries and even across into Africa and Asia of numbers are increasing.
Yeah, I think the German number dropped last year, actually.
Oh, okay.
But I think the other thing is there's certain things that even the ARRL can't stop, which is the age factor. So some of those people that have dropped off the numbers are unfortunately selling keys. But I think it's pretty good that the US are still managing to increase, if only slower now than the previous years, but still increase the total number. They're almost at 750,000.
Right. I just did a quick calculation, too, while we were talking before we started here. And when I was a kid, and I got my license in 1971, and at that time there were about 250,000 licensed radio amateurs. And I did some Googling here, and at the time, there was 207.7 million people in the U.S. So that works out to be about 0.12% of the population were radio amateurs. And so now 750,000 are more or less are licensed hams. The population now is 325.7 million. So that works out to be about 0.23%. So on a per capita basis, we've doubled over the last 50 years or so.
Which is phenomenal growth when you think about it as well. And this whole idea of it being a marginalised, minority hobby and etc. The fact those sort of numbers would put it on par, maybe more mainstream things that people wouldn't necessarily think about. Maybe some average populated sports players and things on those lines. I mean, that is still a serious, decent figure as a hobby, isn't it? So, hopefully that'll help us pick up more traction now. Dan, I know you're very pro and active on training in the UK. These numbers sort of, I know we're not necessarily in the same levels of population, but again, still lots of news stories still coming out about positivity of the training numbers and the passes going up in the UK.
Yeah, it certainly is, and there's certainly a lot of positivity. I mean, everybody's trying very hard to grow the numbers and keep the hobby alive, and I think we're all worldwide doing a reasonably good job at it. And looking at these numbers, well, first thing, hey Dan, I'm one of the 750,000. Yay. Also, looking at this, one of the things I can see from one of the links is it looks like the eastern half of the US has got far more amateurs than the western half. And therefore, I'd suggest that, probably if you're a big DXer, it might be quieter in the West, but if you're a VHF person, you probably want to be over the east side of the country. Now, I can guess why there are more people in the east. Look at this graph, or this map, but I think that's another interesting stat. It's good to see the growth, and I think it's very positive all round. So, what do you think on that one, Dan?
Oh yeah, I'm certainly with you, and I'm always working to do more. So yeah, I'm happy about it.
Exactly.
And of course, the one reason that we have a higher per capita number of hams now is when I was a kid, we had a code test.
And I think that's the big change, though, isn't it, across the board, though, is removing morphs from these tests and making it more accessible for people to get into the hobby, at least certainly at the lower levels. See if they like it, etc. And I think that's always been a positive when you speak to people, is the fact, that morphs hasn't scared them off, and doing removing morphs has made it easier for them to get their licenses.
I still wish the ARRL would do a better study, though. We really need to know more about what's happening. And we've talked about here in the U.S. We've talked about this for years and years and years, but for some reason we just can't seem to get the ARRL hot on it.
No, there's another option as well in the mid-'80s, once CB went through its big excitement in the UK and then went horribly wrong because it got too popular. I think now there are still people around who remember the CB days that don't realise that there's a 3-tier licence system here in the UK, and possibly don't in the States, Dan. I'm guessing on this one, but they could be people that were interested in radio but just lost interest because of the limitations of CB. And now there is a way of getting people that are not necessarily mega technical into our hobby and enjoying our hobby and being part of, rather than us being elitist, I would suggest.
Yeah, I think so. We see a lot of people who they come to our meetings, for example, and they sort of sheepishly say, "Oh yeah, I used to be a CVer," but in some clubs that would be a big negative. In our club, though, we really welcome them. Yeah, well,
the fact is, if they're interested in radio, they're interested in radio, same as us. And quite honestly, some of us would have been equally as active in the CB club if it was active now as we would have been in amateurs. So it's the fact that we've gone to a next level because we want to do more. And I think the people who were in CB didn't realise there was so much more you could do. But we should openly embrace them over if they want to come, I would suggest.
No.
Yep. No, I'm with you there.
Agree with you entirely. We're talking about how you potentially grow the amateur base, etc. Obviously, a great way of doing that is to promote your club and the training you do, etc. And in the UK, ICOM have given clubs the opportunity to list their club on their website to promote what you do. So, I mean, Dad, this is another great opportunity, isn't it, again, to publicise our clubs and what we do, and certainly get new members into the hobby.
Certainly is, and as I say, I would guess, and I don't know 100%, but I would guess Ian Lockyer, the marketing manager at ICOM, this is probably one of his babies. But I know they've done a lot of work with the yachting and boating fraternity, and now they've got possibly the template set up to try and entice people over into amateur radio, people who are buying ICOM rigs. You know, if you go to ICOM's website because you're buying a commercial radio for, say, PMR or a boat radio, then you do see amateur stuff. And if you click on the amateur part of their website, you'll get all that information. So I think it's a good thing, and it's probably very, very similar information that you can get from the RSGB. But if you, for argument's sake, coming from a yachting fraternity, you might not know about the RSGB.
Yeah, and the other thing there is a lot of the ICOM marine radios either already do or can be legally changed by ICOM to cover the amateur bands.
Yeah.
So, there's a link in there as well. If you got somebody that's, interested in yachting and boating and everything else, and then they link up through the fact that the ICOM site says, hey, if you want to know about amateur radio, here's your local club, amateur radio club, go along there and they'll tell you everything. The person might come away and go, yeah, okay, I'll go take my foundation call or whatever level, and then find out they can still use the same rig on their boat for both commercial and amateur usage.
Is there any manufacturers in Germany, Ed, that are doing anything similar to what ICOM are doing in terms of helping clubs in Germany promote themselves?
There are very few amateur radio manufacturers in Germany. They're mainly importers and resellers. The only one I can think off the top of my head is Hilberling, who make probably the best amateur radio equipment in the world, but also the highest price. So, otherwise there's some small manufacturers of stuff around, but there's no... ICOM Europe is based in Germany. Do they do anything like this? Not that I've seen, but they might look at doing it now that ICOM UK have done it.
No problem.
But Kenwood, I think, is based out of the UK to cover Germany, and I'm not sure about Yaesu. I think the same. I think Yaesu's support comes out of the UK.
Yeah, even at ICOM...
And through the dealers, of course.
Yeah, I'd say Ian at ICOM's very active at website development and things like that. I know he spoke to Colin and I about some of the things he's doing. And, the ICOM website is very interesting, very eye-catchy, and they do tend to drag people in because of their radios for lots of different markets, not only amateur, but marine, aircraft, PMR, all those sort of things. So it's a good staging point.
No problem. What about in the States, Dan? Is there anything similar that's happening in the States on this that we can point American clubs to, or is it all pretty much filtered through the ARRL?
Yeah, it's pretty much all through the ARRL. And unfortunately, the ARRL only lists what they call affiliated clubs. And I think probably, I don't know, I'm going to guess 90% of the clubs are ARRL affiliated, but that does still leave a few that are not on that list.
Yeah. Well, guys, we'll put the link to this on the ICQ podcast website, and certainly if you're in the UK, certainly worthwhile getting yourself listed. If anything, it's, it's going to be some link love for you, obviously, to get some more traffic to your website, obviously, piggybacking on the back of ICOM, so certainly check that out for you for now. Well, Dan, I'm going to hand it over to yourself for this next one, because this is something that you've been working on, is in relation to circuits.
Well, so this is an idea I just had, actually, after seeing a Southgate news item on a Scottish program, CQ Scotland, I don't know much about them. It's probably just a couple people doing this, but they're offering free kits to people that show up at some Scottish hamfest. And I said, well, we should do that here actually. And right now this all blue sky stuff, but I don't see any reason why we couldn't do it here. In fact, I'm thinking that maybe I can even get the ARRL and or the IEEE to give me a little money to do it. That way I wouldn't have to pay for these kits out of my pocket. And what they do is they give people a free kit and help them build it, and hopefully get them started on an electronics hobby.
Sounds like a great idea. I suppose the question now, in fact, is this something that, as I say, is only going to be regionalised, or could this be something to be rolled out by anybody in terms of getting hold of these kits? Is it something that could be quite easily available?
Well, I would think they could do. Anyone could do it. I'm going to try and do sort of a pilot program and of course blog about it, and see, run, as we say here, run the flag up the pole and see if anyone salutes it.
Yeah. In Germany, one of the German amateur radio clubs of Vereins that are a member of the Deutsche Amateur Radio Club. Same situation, by the way. Any club that isn't affiliated with DARC doesn't get anything on the DARC website, same as ARRL. But at Friedrichshafen every year, there's one of the groups there and do the same thing. They've got tables set out, soldering irons and kits, and aimed actually more at youngsters than anybody else that can come along and build the kit and take it away with them.
Mm-hmm. Oh my God! It sounds like though this could be maybe a thing to have a look at for a club project, doesn't it, Dad? I mean, or for instance, your Monday night team could be quite interesting stuff, couldn't they?
Yeah. I mean, you can always do these sort of things. And I was going to say, but it got there first about the free show and watching the children build kits. And I think it's quite nice when you take something away with you. I mean, for argument's sake, and I'm going to put you on the spot here a little bit, Colin. A good few years ago, probably about 5 years ago, you came over for a weekend and I taught you how to solder, and you made a little audio amplifier and it worked and you were as happy as anything. And then from a kit, and then we built that 40-meter receiver, the GQRP Sudan 40-meter receiver. And you went back to Ireland really, really pleased with it because you'd made it and it worked. And the cost of the kit was possibly, in my opinion, more than you could have bought something, of comparable quality. But it was about building. It was about the thoroughly enjoyment. But the only downside for you was that your ex-whale wasn't that impressed, was she?
Yeah, how'd you put it? Didn't get it might be the best way of putting it. But no, look, as you rightly say, if you can give somebody something tangible at the end of it, they feel like they got something for the process, and that's exactly what we've always said about this stuff, isn't it? No matter what part of our hobby, particularly when we're working these things, if you can give something to someone to take away, people always want something to take away with them. Why do we go to amateur radio shows and come back with tons of brochures and whatever? We all want to take something away from it. So, no, I'd agree with you entirely. And I've still got the kits. They're still here in the office. So, I'll say, we're certainly when you come over next time, I'll dig them out and still show you they're still in one piece. Okay, well, move on to the next news story now, and this one is a sort of a follow-on from a news story, I think, from last year, I think this was now. This is a Sunday Times piece in relation to problems of the week, scaremonger at amateur radio. So, Dad, I'll let you lead off on this one and fill us in what the Sunday Times have been saying.
Well, this is kind of a difficult one, and from my opinion. I mean, this was an article in the Sunday Times paper, and it's about a neighbour complaining. He moved into a property 2.5 years ago. He moved in very close location to an amateur who just happens to had an extra aerial put up, and he's complaining that the gentleman's complaining that he's upset his Wi-Fi. Now, to upset somebody's Wi-Fi on those frequencies or whatever, HF and VHF, I mean, let's face it, it's a bit like me sitting in San Francisco with my car radio running full volume and somebody in New York complaining I'm giving them a headache. Technically, that's almost as stupid as that. But this lawyer's giving him all sorts of answers and advice on how he can go to the planning permission and argue about it. But effectively, we have a thing called the 4-year rule in the UK. Once an aerial's been up that long, chances are you've got very little chance of getting it taken down. And this is one of these things. If somebody moves in, like my 2 neighbours, I've been here in my house over 30 years. Both my neighbours either side of me have moved in with the antennas up, so they've got no reason to complain. If you move in, I just think this is a bad one. And the advice this solicitor's given him is a bit harsh on the amateur in some ways. But I think that the Wi-Fi thing is possibly a bit of a smokescreen, quite honestly. So there you go, Colin.
Yeah, Dan, remind me, there was that representation to Congress or the Senate, was it last year, about having the right to have your aerials up because of your licensing agreement required you to be available in disaster, etc. I can't remember the name of the act now, do apologise me. But that in the States, I suppose this would be covered off by that sort of legislation, wouldn't it?
Yeah, it might. There, as you may know or may not know, there was a big flap about that because apparently the final version of that bill wasn't as advantageous for hams as some would like. And in fact, I think in this case, the ham might have had a hard time with justifying that many antennas just because of the way the bill was written. And in any case, it's a moot point because the bill never passed. So we're still in the kind of the middle of that.
Oh, there you go. I was on the impression it had passed. So there you go. That's like new theirs. It's like, I mean,
and on top of that, that bill only covered homeowners associations. I don't know if you have those there, but we have these things called homeowners associations. So in some areas, when you buy a house, in your deed or whatever legal papers you sign, you agree to a whole bunch of restrictions. And in most homeowners associations, that includes not putting up an outside antenna. So that was the thrust of that law, is to sort of nullify that clause in any contract,
right?
Because it's a legally binding contract.
Mm-hmm. Okay, I mean, Ed, I know you spotted something interesting in this news story as well, and you're not 100% convinced that it's a legitimate as it makes it sound.
Yeah, I think there's a few things you should look at the details here. The Ms. Boateng, who is the associate solicitor on this, works for a company that specialises in real estate related law. To me, I then ask, is this gentleman now wishing to move house? And of course, if he could get the radio amateur to take down the masts, or at least not put any more up, it's going to be easier for him to sell his house at a higher price. So that could be part of the factor. That's happened before. The other thing, I'll echo what Martin said. It's very rare that something on HF or even VHF is going to affect Wi-Fi. We also have to remember that Wi-Fi is actually an unlicensed transmitter and receiver, and they have no protection in law. However, having said that, this all comes down to neighbour relations, and that's something that we all have to work at, both from the amateur radio side and also in general. If you don't get on with your neighbour, your life is pretty bad. And in this particular case, if this gentleman, I did have his name, Scott somebody, was it? Anyway, it's all linked to from the show notes anyway. He needs help to sort out a problem on his Wi-Fi. If we believe the Wi-Fi complaint is actually true, that he's having a problem with his Wi-Fi, who in the area near him might be able to help him for free, time-wise anyway, not necessarily if somebody has to be bought, that's something else, but the one expert in his area is the person he's attacking. An amateur radio enthusiast could come by, look at that and go, oh, okay, I see what's happening. There's somebody else down the street starting using the same channel as you are on your Wi-Fi. We'll just change the Wi-Fi channel on your router. There you are, problem's gone. Mm-hmm. Or we'll look at your router in a different position because then you'll get a better, stronger signal to where you're going. Yet Wi-Fi is not a constant service, and especially as more and more devices get added around the world, it's going to be more of a problem. It's already congested. And the one person that could help this gentleman with the problem, he's blaming him without any evidence, without any investigation. And I believe I already heard somewhere basically Ofcom told the guy to forget it. So they're not even going to come by to have a look because they just threw it out of hand because it doesn't make sense what he's saying. So a better relationship with your neighbour, and none of this would have needed to happen, and the company from Ms. Boateng wouldn't have made so much money.
True. And one other small point here, just mentioning Wi-Fi just for a second here. The more and more devices you bring into your home network, and the more the Wi-Fi radios are in it, etc., cheap Wi-Fi radios will not cut it. If you're going to have lots of Wi-Fi devices in your house, you need to invest in decent Wi-Fi, and that will help solve some of your problems. So yeah, I've never known anybody that has good Wi-Fi radios ever have a problem with Wi-Fi. So yeah,
is that like at my house?
A friendly IT consultant got your good Wi-Fi radios, and they work perfectly in your house, don't they?
Yeah. My house. I got so fed up with Mrs. B complaining that she'd look at the bar graph, the signal bar graph, and she'd say, "Oh, it's not very good here." So I live in a terraced house, and it over 3 floors, ground floor, middle floor, and top floor were in loft conversion in the top floor. And there's an access point in the top floor in the loft conversion. There's an access point in the front room. There's an access point in the kitchen. And she's got brilliant Wi-Fi. The trouble is, most of my neighbours are fighting me for the same channels, but I don't get any grief from Mrs. Butler. No, there you go.
And her left and her right head both appreciate how much you've done for her Wi-Fi. Anyway, so let's move on to the next news story here. Buyer beware. I think this one comes under here. And what happens when you buy a aerial that's wrong from a retailer that's going into liquidation? So Dad, this is the tale of Simon Blight, who bought the wrong product from Maplin.
Yeah, well, I mean, I expect everybody's going to say to me, well, yeah, I should fall back on Simon's side, but I'm just going to put in, because we don't know 100% on this, but he bought an antenna and he said it wasn't what he wanted when he got it. Well, Maplin have gone into not liquidation, they're in receivership at the moment, which isn't far from it, and they're selling off their gear at a muchly reduced price. And he's bought an antenna, he's got it, and he said, well, it's not what I wanted. Well, that's not their fault. If they were continuing trading and they were making good money on a lot of this stuff, then, probably the dealer would have taken it back. But why would somebody, if you go out and buy the wrong thing, you can't take it back. If you went out and bought a computer game, and said, well, actually, I didn't want that one. After you've broken the seal on it or whatever, they're not going to take it back. So I'm kind of, there's a moral issue, but I don't think the dealer's done anything wrong, quite honestly, Colin.
No, and I don't know what you're actually expecting. I mean, if they offer him a credit note because he got it wrong, credit note's pretty worthless in Wapley at the moment. I mean, they're pretty much, there's hardly anything left on the stocks, and they're shutting down the stores and they're running away, so I sort of agree with yourself, actually, here. This is more buyer beware for when you're buying from liquidated stock. It was brought online, you didn't see the product, and that maybe more seems to be a problem. I don't know if any of you guys, Ed or Dan, think any differently or agree with the general sentiment.
Well, the phrase, I think, legally always used to be fit for service. If the product you bought is fit for service for what it's specified to do, then it's not the supplier's problem. In a lot of cases, a lot of shops will take them back or give you a credit note or exchange it for a different one just purely as good customer service, but they don't actually have to. And in this case, this gentleman, I think, was asking for his money back as well, not to get it replaced with the one he really should have ordered. So it's questionable. And considering it costs £19.99, the hassle he's had trying to chase all this up and all the trouble that he's probably getting in through all this. For 19.99, he probably should just have sold it on eBay.
Yeah, take your loss and move on. I'm sure law's very similar in the States, isn't it, Dan, in terms of how this would have been dealt with?
Oh yeah, sure. It's almost exactly the same. If most retailers will take things back like that. If and I've done this, I've bought something that I didn't want actually and took it back. People returned it, and I was happy as a clam. But when someone goes out of business, or you buy something on clearance here, you don't expect to be able to return it. Yeah. That's just the way it is.
Yeah, no, I agree with that. Unfortunately, Matt put in one of those horrible situations of a store that done good for so many years and tried to go off and chase the pound and failed miserably. And whilst I lament the demise of another, if you like, boy shop on the high street, I've got to be honest, I won't be too sad to see him go, but unfortunately, in this case scenario, in fact, this guy is 20 quid down for the wrong device. So hopefully you can, let's say, take Ed's advice, flog it on eBay, cut your losses, and move on. Right, last news story here for the round table. And Ed, we've got schools in the New York district talking to other schools and individuals around the world using ham radio.
Yeah, it's a nice story. You hear about school clubs and things, and this seems to be a little bit more than that they're actually trying to introduce the idea of public service and law enforcement and everything else along with amateur radio, and showing how amateur radio can be part of that. And my guess would be that the teacher's actually a radio ham that's behind this, but it's a matter of some of them have got the license already, others are interested, they're setting up a club station, and it seems to have almost been put in somehow as almost part of the syllabus of their studies, and I think that's really a really neat way of going about it. And the result is interesting, people with interest in it getting involved, and the fact that it's happening in multiple schools means the schools can talk to each other, and in fact there's actually a school net on every week or every couple of weeks, I think. Dan, do you know about that one? There's something about schools and things, isn't there?
Yeah, I don't actually know about that particular net. I did actually though read about a similar situation of a high school in British Columbia, which is a Canadian province, and apparently this high school has French as a big thing. They teach a lot of the French language there, and they've put in a ham radio club in part to be able to speak to hams in Quebec and enhance the students' French language skills. So I thought that was kind of neat too.
And I think the good thing about this as well is Dan, is that the students aren't necessarily young sort of 6, 7, 8 year olds, run around with a handheld and squawk away. These are more mature students, shall we say, who are going to fully understand the benefits of what they're being offered. Right.
I found that kids don't really start understanding what ham radio is all about till they're at least 10, and usually even a little bit later. So that the fact that these are high school students, they kind of know more what they're getting into.
Yeah, certainly. So, I suppose the next thing would be, Dad, wouldn't it be great if now this became a transatlantic contact as well, to show them the distances that could be achieved?
Well, there you go. Do they have ham radio clubs in the? I don't know if you call them high schools there, but do they have the ham radio clubs there at the schools?
There are a few, Dan, but they're few and far between. But exactly, just reiterating some of the things you said, Dan. I mean, amateur radio. Let's just take it as what could it help? Why would it not be in the syllabus for a school? If you break it down, you've got science. You can cover bits of it off, covers parts of science. Mathematics. Now, when you're teaching somebody mathematics, you're teaching them real-world mathematics with amateur radio stuff, because, Ohm's law. I remember doing Ohm's law in physics at school, and it was like, well, what do I need this for? When I teach it as part of a foundation course, I teach people the reason for it. I teach them about working out what fuse you would need for a device and those sort of things. So the mathematics of calculating antennas, all those sort of things. Foreign languages, as you say, not only French, but a number of other languages. Geography, finding out where these countries are. General communication skills, which so many youngsters don't have because they bury their head in a terminal or a tablet or whatever. There's so much amateur radio could actually bring to a curriculum, and it fits into so many different lessons. It's almost as if it could be a foundation for learning. So probably I'm a little bit passionate about it, and I've found that youngsters, if you're passionate about what you're telling them, and you don't have to I was going to say ham it up, and that will be a rotten pun, but you don't have to be over the top. But if you explain what you're doing and you show them the benefits of it and the reasons why you're doing some of this, I think they'll rip your hand off for it. So there you go. Sorry, that's finished.
No, look.
Yeah, I think Sorry.
Go on, I was going to say, I think there's a lot to be said for those, isn't there, Ed?
Yeah, I was just going to say, one thing we should do, of course, is the students at the Mariah Central School who are going to be taking their exam next Monday, so the day after this podcast comes out on April the 16th. Good luck to them in the exam, and thanks to the local amateur radio club, Champlain Valley Amateur Radio Club, who will be running the exams for them. Let's hope there'll be more to add to the existing four licensees in the club, because the picture shows, about 8 or 9. So I'm guessing the rest of them will probably pick up their licenses next Monday, which would be very nice.
Yeah, good on them. That's what I say. Good on them.
I agree with you. Certainly agree. Okay, so let's go on our roundup now and see what we've been up to since you guys have been last on the show. Dan, we'll start with yourself. What have you been up to?
Well, I've had a couple interesting things. So last Saturday, or just this week, Saturday, I participated in a special event station, K0P. And as it turns out, Detroit, which I live very nearby, was the first city in the U.S. anyway to have equip their police cars with radios. So we were commemorating that event. The program was started on April 7th, 1928. And that was kind of a lot of fun. As far as in my shack, I've come across an interesting bit of test equipment. I now have a tube tester, or valve tester, as you guys would say, and having some fun playing with that.
Well, that sounds like that would warm your heart there, Dad.
Certainly would. And the annoying thing was, back in the 1970s, I actually had a Mullard valve tester, and decided that I didn't really need it because valve technology and gave it away. Or I think I might have even thrown it away, which is the frightening thing. And some of the test equipment I had back then, before I became into amateur radio, it breaks my heart to think what went, because I didn't think I'd ever need it again. And today, people are crying out for them.
Yeah, no,
I think that valve tester idea, back in the early days of TVs, people made a lot of money out of those, because TV valves used to blow quite regularly in the early models, and your technician engineer would come along with a valve tester, plug it in, okay, that's the blown one, put the replacement in, charge his fee, and off he goes.
Yeah, you wouldn't have carried my valve tester, Ed. It was pretty heavy. But I think people went along to shops and took their valves in to be tested in the early radio days.
Yeah, as well, yeah.
TV. But I did actually work on valve technology, and my City and Guilds training course in electronics was the last one that did valves as part of the syllabus. And we used to find many a time, I was a TV engineer, and you'd go to somebody's house and they'd had distorted sound, and you'd arrive and you'd take the back of the telly, and sitting in the valve socket, it was a brand new valve, and it was still distorted. And you get your soldering iron out, change the cathode bias resistor and a cathode bias capacitor, and change the pair of them, and you get beautiful sound. You know, so yes, when valves do go wrong, but often it's the components around them, because what used to happen is a lot of the components on valve TVs were very close to their rating. So, you know, if a 1 watt resistor would do, if it was drawing 0.9 of a watt, then they'd put a 1 watt resistor in. And so there wasn't a lot of tolerance and a lot of heat in these things. Right. And it used to be, you know, you'd end up replacing a couple of small bias components, which would actually fix the initial problem.
I think that's one reason semiconductor tech devices are so reliable, because you just don't have that much heat that you used to have in them.
Yeah, you're dead right, Dan. I mean, the massive amount of heat, and you think, you know, a PCB board in them days, back in, say, the 70s and 80s, the PCB boards were much, much larger, hell of a lot of heat in the devices. And you switch it, say, a telly on, it heats up, the board expands, everything expands. You then switch it off, contracts, expands, contracts, and you've got your line output transformer in the UK oscillating at 15,625 times a second. So it's actually rattling on the board, and you used to notice that it would crack all the solder joints around the line output transformer because they never put enough solder on them when they flow soldered them in the factory. So yeah, sorry, I'm going off in nostalgia talk here, Dan.
There's a lovely. Let me guess. There's a lovely gooey glow about you at the moment. So talk about what else you've been up to. While you're mentioning things. What else have you been up to this last couple of weeks?
Well, not a lot of radio, apart from I've been on the local repeaters a couple of times and spoke to people, and that's been quite useful. As you guys know, I was on the Belfast a couple of weeks ago. I haven't done much about that since. I'm teaching a foundation course. We've had Easter, and that rather got screwed up. I should have had time to do things, and I didn't. But the last thing I've been doing is my house has strange wiring in the hallway, as you know, Colin, but the rest of the world wouldn't. And for years, I've had a light sensor switch in the hall where you walk into the hall and the light comes on. When it works very, very well, it died, and the triac had gone leaky. So I ordered a new triac up, and it came within a couple of days, replaced it, but that wasn't the only fault on it. So that got thrown away, and looking around, and in the end, I ended up going on Amazon and picking up a device for just under £7. And it sounds really silly, just under £7, that works absolutely brilliant. You replaces a normal standard light switch, and if you walk into the hall, if it's daylight, the light doesn't come on. If it's dark and you walk in the hall, the light comes on, and it stays on for anywhere between 10 seconds and 5 minutes, and I've got it set for about 3. So that's all working again. So I'm quite happy. But when you look at it, you think, for the price, how little it costs, I'm surprised more people don't have them.
Can you send me a link to that place? Because I'm thinking about Harmonic's bedrooms who keep leaving lights on, and the idea of actually only coming on when it's dark for a short period of time could actually save me a ton of money on electricity bills. Can you send me a link to that?
It could do, but the thing is, you can't override it, so it won't come on during the day if they want it. You need it on during the day. But yeah, I'll do that for you.
No. You just ban it.
You also need it to turn the light off if there's no movement in the room for a period of time.
Oh yeah, it does that.
Okay.
It basically, you walk into the room and the light comes on. Yeah. And when you walk out the room, anywhere between 10 seconds and 5 minutes, depending on the adjuster pot, it will then turn the light off.
All right, yeah.
And then as I say, during daylight, it doesn't switch the light on. When it's dark in the hall and you walk in the hall, it turns the light on. So it works very well. And I say, under £7. I think is that phenomenal.
Bargain. Ed, we'll finish up with yourself. What have you been up to over the last few weeks?
Yeah, Colin. Well, since Dan mentioned his COP special event station there, K0P, I also talked to a special event station about 3 weeks ago. Some people on some ship somewhere, some boat somewhere called GB80 GGCN, I think. Yeah, that was about 3 weeks ago. So that's since the last time I've been on the show. That was nice to catch the guys on the Belfast there. Apart from that, I've been doing my usual SOTA activations, and related to that, I spent a lot of time on a loaded vertical antenna kit that I got from the US, and put an awful lot of effort into it. And at the end of the day, it's not suitable for portable use. It keeps changing its resonant frequency, depends how it's set up. So going on in circles trying to find out why on earth that is like that. And at the end of the day, for the $15, I'll rip it down for the parts and look for something better. I'm also getting used to my new rig, the X108G, that I did a review on a few weeks ago, a couple of months ago. And that's been used on the last 3 or 4 activations. And critical to the time now, as they say, we've gone past Easter and spring's here. Got the VHF antennas back up for 6.4 and 2 meters, ready for summer. And that's about it from this side.
From that side. Oh, just confirm.
How about you, Colin?
What about me? Well, me, I've been. I suppose I've been doing marketing planning, the boring stuff that we have to do. So we alluded to this earlier on in the episode there. Ed, I know, who goes to the ham radio event in Friedrichshafen every year, will be joined by myself and Chris Howard, M0TCH, and we'll also be joined by my senior harmonic as well, who we're going to use as a mule at the show. So there'll be us guys there at the show in about 7 weeks, isn't it, Ed? I think 6-7 weeks, something to be that show will be. It's the end of May. That
1st of June.
1st of June, I think it starts.
1st and 2nd of June or something, yeah.
That weekend, anyway. So we'll be there at the show. Yep. Feel free to come along. We'll be wearing the orange T-shirts, obviously. Feel free to come along, say hello. We promise we only put microphones and cameras in front of you if you want us to. If not, we're more than happy to have a chat with you and say to hear your thoughts on the show, and obviously pass any messages to any of your favourite presenters who aren't there. We were hoping to do an event in the UK as well in the next few weeks, but unfortunately that event's been cancelled. So we're continuing to plan on for other events in the UK, and we'll give you more information as those are lined up. So we're trying to get out and about a bit more this year. And I suppose the pressure on us, Dan, is to sometime get to Dayton and to get a trip to there sometime. So you never know what happens on that one. But to say, it's always been a goal for I know some of us in Europe to get to Dayton one time. So we'll have to pick your brains after this year's event and get the lay of the land about how we might do that one day. So we'll certainly do that for you. So we've been doing a lot of planning work and trying to get the team out and about. So obviously you can meet us. As Ed mentioned, the guys on the Belfast a lot in the HMS Belfast in the UK. But as I say, we will be at what's it called in Newark now? National Hamfest. National Hamfest, as I say, in September. As well, so that's definitely confirmed that we'll be there as well. So yeah, doing a lot of those bits and pieces from that end. Right, well guys, well that just wraps it about up. Thanks a lot for joining us, as I say. So always a pleasure to chair you guys. So thank you very much, and thanks for helping me through. So from Ed, DD5 Lima Papa, Martin M1RB W9ICQ, and Dan, Kilo Bravo 6 November Uniform. Thanks a lot for taking part this season.
Very welcome. 73 to all.
My pleasure. 7-3.
Yeah, thanks, Colin, and thanks for doing my job today.
73's all.
Keep your amateur ham radio podcast advert free by donating less than a length of coax. Visit www.icqpodcast.com/donate now. For all the news, links and information, visit www.icqpodcast.com.
Now it's time for a look at the news in brief from me, Colin M6BOY. And we start off with an event coming up just in a couple of days' time from release, which is the Amateur World Radio Days on the 18th of April. And IARU Region 1 is promoting events by members to over the 3 million people worldwide with an interest in wireless communications. The IAU, who were founded in 1925 in Paris, are recommending using the modern hashtag World Amateur Radio Day on Twitter, Instagram, Facebook to promote events showcasing the scientific benefits and expertise of amateur radio. So certainly look out on your social media networks on the 18th of April for events that are happening to promote our hobby. News here of an interesting first contact that's believed to be made on 136 kilohertz. This is between Chris Wilson, 2E0 India Lima Yankee, and a transatlantic contact with an amateur in the States called Paul Keeley, November 1 Bravo Uniform Golf. Chris is in Shropshire and Paul is in Maine. They were using a mode called DFCW60, which is a dual frequency CW mode with a 60-second dit length. Now, the contacts aren't quick, and it took a combination of work over 4 nights to complete the sequence using a night-by-night sequence. The two-way exchange included call signs, signal reports, acknowledgements. They used the TMOR reporting system borrowed from the Moonbounce world. So a very interesting story. This one, we've got links as well into this for you for more reading, and certainly set of interesting fun there. Hamsphere 4.0 uses phone, SSB, Morse code and digital modes, and while there's lots of awards for single sideband, there's now 4 new awards in the digital modes, but they've made them a challenge to win. With these modes becoming more and more popular, I say the group decided to create some awards for people, and say to enjoy the digital part of the hobby. So a link on the website to these new awards for Digimodes on Hamsphere 4.0. And guys who chase awards, hopefully there's some enjoyment there for you in the hobby. Well, now we move on to our features episode, which is a feature on an introduction to Decibels. I hope you enjoy.
And now what you've all been waiting for, this episode's feature from the ICQ podcast. Hi guys, for this feature I wanted to talk about a simple look at decibels. Now the reason I'm saying it's a simple look at decibels is when you go off on the internet and you look for information, there's lots of sites with a tremendous amount of maths explaining how it all works. However, I'm not going to bore you with maths today, and I'm sorry for those who enjoy maths, but there are 3 reasons I'm not going to give you the heavy maths. A, I don't want to put you to sleep, and B, I'm not very good at it myself. Hi. Anyway, why decibels? Well, decibels play a big part in amateur radio, more than probably most people think. You know, decibels are used in sound and antenna gains and all those sort of things, but we'll come on to those as we move on. So why did decibels come about? Well, in the early days of telecommunications and phone lines, the old phone companies, they could work out how much loss they had over a mile. They used to send a tone down the line and they'd know how much loss of signal they'd get a mile away. And it was easy. If you were then going 5 miles, you have 5 times the loss. But that's okay if you've got one common medium that you're transferring information through. However, if you've got other things that have got losses in them, and it becomes very difficult to work out losses and gains through a system. So the guys, I believe at Bell Laboratories, came up with a new measurement in 1920. So it's pretty much almost 100 years ago they came up with this measurement. And it's called the Bell. Now the Bell is named after Alexander Graham Bell, who invented the telephone. And he was the founder of Bell Telephone Company. So he gets his name associated with the decibel. However, they decided that the bell was far too big a number to work with, and they decided that working in decibels or tenths of bells was an easier and more useful device to use. Now, let's talk about sound first. And okay, as amateur radio operators, sometimes we have headphones on. And one of the things we often say to people is when you put your headphones on, adjust the volume at the start of your use of headphones, and then leave the volume control alone. Because what happens is that you can set the volume and you'll be listening to something, and over a period of time you decide that, oh, it's not really loud enough, so you crank it up a bit more and crank it up a bit more, and before you know it, you're in danger of damaging your hearing. So in fairness, well, let's have a look at on the sound side how we measure decibels. And total silence or near total silence is the reference point for sound, and that is 0 dB. Going up into a whisper, if somebody's whispering very quietly, that's said to be about 15 dB. A normal conversation, you're having a conversation with your mates, about 60 dB. So, it's come up quite a bit. If you're out mowing the lawn, well, about 90 dB they reckon. And if you honk your car horn, the sound in dBs from that is reputed to be about 110 dB. So you certainly get a lot of attention honking your horn. However, a rocket converted jet or jet engine is looking at something like 120 dBs of sound pressure. So that's quite worrying. And we know that is exactly the same. The further away from the source, the sound will get attenuated. So if I'm right on top of something, it might be 90 dBs. If I'm 100 meters away, it might be a lot less, or will be a lot less. No, there's no might about it. Anyway, what we need to understand is any sound above 85 dBs can cause loss of hearing if you stay in that sound for long periods and have lots of exposure to it. So we need to be very careful because we don't obviously lose our hearing. So having things too loud will certainly cause you a problem. Now, 8 hours at 90 dB can cause damage to your ears, as was said. And interestingly, if you look at the amount of noise in a city, it can be close to 80 or 90 dBs of just background noise. So city traffic, they reckon about 80 dBs of noise. So sometimes it's nice to get away and just be a bit quiet, obviously. Now, moving on for radio. Well, when we teach the radio course and the technician course in the States and the intermediate in the UK, we talk about using decibels as a means of measurement. And kind of, this is their first introduction to them. Now, the decibel scale is effectively a logarithmic scale. And most people think that your hearing is linear. Unfortunately, it's not. Your hearing is logarithmic. We can't change that. And that's why potentially volume controls, all volume controls should be, and I say should be because I've come across a few strange situations, but they all should be logarithmic so that they change as your hearing changes. And as you turn them up, they're logarithmic. So with dBs, we have this scale. And we say to people, if I double the value, I'm changing by approximately 3 dB. So if I go up by 3 dB, I've doubled the sound or doubled the power. If I go down by 3 dB, minus 3 dB, I've halved it. And we say that for every 3 dB gain, we're doubling, and for every minus 3 dB, we're halving. So if I start off with a unit of, and I'm going to use units here, if I start off with a unit of 5, and I have a gain of 3 dB, I double that to 10. If I have another 3 dB gain, I double that to 20. So, and vice versa, going down. Now, a gain of 10 dBs is effectively a gain of 10. So every 10 dBs is 10 times the original signal. So if I had an arbitrary number of 5 and a gain of 10, I'd be at 50. The result would be at 50. Now, as I say, that's the simple facts. So some other facts about decibels. Well, decibels are a ratio of the power of two numbers. So effectively, you've got the ratio between two measurements. Decibels, as I've said, are a logarithmic relationship. A decibel is a tenth of a bell, and there are no units in decibels. So decibels, they have no units. You just have numbers, and you work from a reference point, and I'll come on to that in a minute. So don't forget, it's logarithmic. Now, moving on from us amateurs. Now, this is the one that sometimes catches us. So we see all sorts of abbreviations like dBm, dBw, dBv, dBi, dBd. And you're thinking, what's all this mean? Well, there are lots of things you can use dBs to track. And as I said at the start, a few minutes ago, it's the measurement of units you're going to be working in. So for argument's sake, if I'm working in millivolts, I will use dBm for millivolts. And my reference point is a 1 millivolt. So if I start off dB0 is 1 millivolt, and I go up from there. If I start off with dBWs, if I want to work out dBW of my radio, dBW, 0 dBW is 1 watt. So if I double that with a 3 dB gain, it's 2 watts. And it goes up from there. dBV is for voltage, and not one we often use in amateur radio, the same as dV microvolts is another one you may come across. The two you're going to come across most often on amateur radio from an aerial point of view or an antenna point of view is dBi, which is the gain of an isotropic antenna. Now, an isotropic antenna is an antenna that radiates in all directions in clear space. So that's the reference point of 0 dB. Now, dBd is the maximum gain of a half-wave dipole in free space. So you're measuring your reference point is the dipole in free space. Now, there is a gain difference between dBi and dBd. dBd has a gain of 2.14 over dBi. So if one manufacturer is recommending an antenna as, let's say, 6 dBd gain, and another one says he's got a gain of 8.12 or 8.14 dBi, that's effectively the same, because there is a 2.14 difference between dBi and dBd. So what you need to do is always check the measurements that the manufacturer is actually using. And let's be honest, if I was an antenna manufacturer, I'd use dBi because the numbers are bigger, they look more exciting on the packet, and us amateurs always like to get our money's worth and look for the biggest number. So, check that manufacturer A and manufacturer B are using the same starting point and using so that you don't run out and get the wrong one or think you're getting a better deal than the others. So, uses for us, uses for us with dB are quite good in calculating system gain. So for argument's sake, when you get far more into it, and I'm not going to cover this in any great detail, but you could say my radio has a gain of this, plus, say, 5 dB. My feeder has a loss of minus 2 dB, which means effectively you've still got a gain of 3 dB at the aerial. The aerial or the antenna has got a gain of 5 dB, so the actual radiating off the aerial is 8 dB. And then you'll have the path loss between you and the next station, and what the level, you can then work out the path loss and how much signal will actually make that antenna. So the idea is that dBs, you add them, subtract them in a system to give you an overall number at the end, and that is the how you work that one out. As I say, with antennas, well, look at the difference between dBi and dBd. There is a difference, as I said. dBds will always be 2.14 decibels lower than dBi. So just make sure that you don't get caught out on that one. So I hope this has been of interest. It's just a quick dip in the toe in the water on dBs. I've had a number of students keep asking me little bits and pieces, but one of the easiest ways to show this, if any of your instructors, is by drawing the radiating pattern of an isotropic aerial, then drawing the radiating pattern on top of that of a dipole, and then showing the Yagi, a radiating pattern for a Yagi, and then you can see where the gain actually happens. You can see the ideal isotropic aerial, you can see a half-wave dipole, and you can see why the difference between the radiating pattern from the isotropic antenna radiator. I hope this has been of interest to you.
Well, no, I hope you really enjoyed Martin's feature on his introduction to decibels. Obviously a very deep topic there, Dad, but certainly at least to get the base and foundations means obviously you can understand all the other stuff that's out there on the internet. So I think that'd be a correct way of summing up, wouldn't it?
Yeah, certainly would be. And I mean, it's not a too technical look at the decibels, but if you're really into the maths, there's a hell of a lot out there, as you say, Colin.
Exactly so. Well, as always, guys, we'd like you to consider us in the usual ways. Remember us at icqpodcast.com/donate, where anything you send their way is always greatly appreciated. Sterling Coffee set up a monthly donation for this episode. They're really, really important, obviously, because they help us pay our web hosting costs, etc. And as they keep the show advert free, which I'm sure you guys all appreciate. I'm sure you guys have all seen the stuff with Facebook and Cambridge Analytica recently. It goes back to the same old thing. You know, there's 3 ways of doing it. If you pay for a product, you are the product, or you donate to the product. And Sterling and the other monthly donors and all the guys that send us one-off donations obviously appreciate what we do and want to keep us advert free. So we really do appreciate that there. Check us out in the usual ways, icqpodcast.com, the Facebook group, our Twitter handles, at M1MLB for you, Dad, and at Colin Butler for me. Check us out on LinkedIn, etc. We'd like to thank our roundtable contributors this episode, Dan Romanchik KB6 November Uniform, Ed DD5 Lima Papa, and of course yourself, Martin M1MLB W9 ICQ. And it was great to sit in and chair this episode there. So we certainly had fun as always there. Now, Dad, I know you were chatting to ICOM this week, ICOM in the UK, and you got some news about a very popular member of staff there at ICOM who certainly helps us out and gives us a little bit of information when we bump into him regularly throughout the year.
Yes, certainly do. And this is from the heart, guys. ICOM, those of you who go to rallies, those of you that ask for technical advice have probably come across this gentleman. Gentleman name of Chris Ridley, G8GKC. Check out ICOM's main page. Chris is not a well bunny at the moment, and you know, I think it's about time that we just give ICOM a call and say that we're thinking of Chris, or send a card, a get well soon card, because Chris is always there for us at rallies. You know, I don't think I've ever been to a rally that ICOM have been to that Chris hasn't been there on the stand, answering technical advices, and uses his Sundays. Now, you could argue, yeah, it's Sunday and he gets paid for it, but he's away from his family, and he always makes time for us, and he's a very genuine, nice guy, and he's still a little bit down at the moment. So guys, think about it. Maybe a get well card to ICOM, maybe a phone call. Just voicing your opinion of, how and a get well for him. And I know sounds a bit of an appeal, but it really is, because the guy has done a lot for us in the UK and Northern Ireland. And I spoke to ICOM and passed on our sincere hopes that Chris gets better soon from the ICQ team on Friday. So up to you guys, but I think Chris is a real nice guy and would appreciate just knowing that we care about him.
Yeah, exactly. 2 seconds of our time, I'm sure, will make a big difference to Chris X. So, ICOM UK's website, we'll try and put a link for this on the ICQ podcast website under the show page. You guys can check out the details, and obviously anything you can probably do there if you wish to. I'm sure it'll be appreciated by Chris and his family. Well, that about wraps up the episode. It's 264 for the ICQ podcast. So I think it's about time, Dad, that you went off to the kitchen, rummaged around in that cupboard for a biscuit, and started getting a brew on.
I certainly will, Colin. Your mum will be in shortly from work, so out in the cupboard, put the kettle on, and get that tea, and we might even find her a chocolate biscuit if she's been good. Hi. So no problems, Colin.
No problems at all. Well, 73 is all, and we'll catch you in a fortnight's time.
Yeah, 73.